This is Terms of Reference. I'm your host, Stephen Laddick. Tamar Koosed is the founder and director of Manaus Consulting, where her work focuses on impact assessments and corporate social responsibility. She has provided her expertise to organizations such as Plan International, Underwriters Laboratories, the Microsoft Foundation, and the Levi Strauss Foundation in places like Vietnam, Nepal, El Salvador, Colombia, Haiti, Brazil, and India. She is a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Shapers community and has published reports and articles with Business for Social Responsibility, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the United Nations Global Compact, among others. Originally from Brazil, Tamar holds a bachelor's degree in international relations from the University of Southern California and a master's in international affairs from the University of California in San Diego. I spoke with Tamar in California. Hi there, Tamar. Thank you so much for being on the Terms of Reference podcast with me today.
Hi, Stephen. So glad to talk to you.
Where am I calling you today?
I am in Los Angeles, California today.
Los Angeles, California. I hope that you're still enjoying permanent summer.
Yes, it never ends here. It's still very, very sunny. I'm, going to the beach over the weekend, so it's always warm in California.
Fantastic. You're the president of Manaus Consulting. Tell us what that means. What is it that you do for the organization right now, and what's the focus of your consulting company?
So Manaus Consulting, I started the company in 2009, right after graduate school. And we work basically in two fields mostly. We work in corporate social responsibility and impact evaluation, so more focused in the development field. When it comes to corporate social responsibility, we're usually helping companies better understand the human rights challenges that they face in their supply chain. So we're looking at issues of labor standards and where are they producing and how can they engage with their suppliers to improve people's lives that are making their products. But we're also helping them with strategy and how to implement more socially responsible practices for their employees and their community outreach activities, or at times just, be more responsible in the way that they do business and what they're selling and what they're putting out there in the world. In the area of international development, we really are much more focused on impact evaluation. So we're generally assisting sort of large international development organizations measure the impact of their interventions. So we're going in and doing either qualitative or quantitative evaluations to try to, estimate the social impact of their projects.
And are you hands-on day-to-day on the projects, or are you at the steering wheel of the company and running the organization?
That's been an evolving role for me with the company. I think I've swung the pendulum a little bit over the last 2 years, and I'm trying to find what makes me the happiest. And I think I am the happiest when I'm very involved in the implementation of our projects and executing the work that we're so passionate about. I think that realization really came after I had a baby about 9 months ago.
And congratulations.
Thank you. Really seeing my time as very limited and seeing that, I want to be doing the things that I love. And, I do, of course, have to manage the company, but I don't want to let go of the taste and of the fun and of the thrill of executing our project. So now I've been very much splitting my time, I would say 50-50. 50% where I'm doing a lot more company management activities, and then 50% I am taking over some projects and leading on the implementation of some projects, because that's really what makes me happy, and I think that's why we're doing this work. So sure. I don't want to let go of that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and it's something we often hear on the podcast about people, especially in our particular industry, development and social responsibility, that's most of the reason why you get in this work, right? It's not for the paycheck. It's about making the change. Tell me, you said that you work on human rights challenges with your clients. Give me a story of that. Give me an example of what kind of challenges do your clients sometimes face?
Good example is we're working currently with a large food and beverage company here in the United States. And oftentimes companies in the United States have visibility into just their first year suppliers. So the other companies, either in the U.S. or outside of the U.S. that they're purchasing their products directly from. And food and beverage companies, for example, really have a very complex agricultural supply chain. And it's hard for them to dig through that complex supply chain and understand what are the issues that workers are facing. So we've been working a lot on very basic human rights challenges like forced labor issues, child labor issues, human trafficking issues in various parts of the world. So really going out, doing key stakeholder interviews, interviewing workers, going out to the field, seeing what's happening, understanding the structure of that supply chain and providing that information, doing that human rights hotspot analysis for the client, giving them a full picture of what's happening in their supply chain. What are the risks that these workers are experiencing? And then helping them understand, okay, what leverage points do you have? What does your sphere of influence look like? Who can you pretty much pressure, and what requirements can you put in place to impact the lives of these workers? It can be very challenging, because I think these human rights issues surround us at all times. It's not as easy to remediate them by just implementing a company policy. They're often, almost always, very ingrained in the economic hardship of a country or just the social and legal framework of a country. But we try to find ways in which companies can help and work with other stakeholders like governments, like NGOs, to improve the conditions of those workers. So it's very interesting and rewarding work.
Is there a typical process that you go through? You said, you're going out and doing stakeholder interviews. You're going out into the field. Is this a unique approach for every client that you have, or is there a fairly typical way that you do a mapping process?
I think the methodology can end up being very similar, but it always takes you in a different direction once you start putting it together, right? Depending on the project. We usually will start doing very thorough. I think everyone that works in our field understands that you got to do your homework before you hit the ground. So we're very much perfectionists, and we'll do hours and hours and hours and hours of desktop review before we talk to anyone and before we go on the ground. So we usually do a very thorough literature review, desktop sort of assessment, and then we'll start mapping out the issues, sort of what are the main material issues that we're after here. And then we'll identify the stakeholders that have a say in those issues. And we'll always target stakeholders in all areas of society. We'll talk to government, we'll talk to civil society. In our case, we'll often talk to unions, NGOs, development organizations that are acting in the field that we're interested in. So we'll go after doing our homework, we'll talk to them, and that usually is what takes us in different directions. These people are so knowledgeable. They're there on the ground. They're seeing the situation day in, day out. And then we'll actually go to the field, and we'll bring in our impact evaluation side into corporate social responsibility. And we'll do sometimes random samples of sites to go to and who to talk to. We'll try to get, depending on the budget of the project, we'll try to get a representative sample of sites to go and observe what's going on there. So we'll try to merge our quantitative impact evaluation world, which we're very passionate about, with our corporate social responsibility world. So I would say, that there's a set methodology of like desktop research, talking to people that know more than you do about the different sides of the issue, and then going on the ground. But, once you're doing each of those things, you're often going in very different directions for each project.
What's the genesis of this work, especially in the corporate social responsibility portion of your practice? Are you going out and hitting the pavement, knocking on doors, bidding for work, or are corporations seeking you out? How does that work?
So in terms of business development, we've been very lucky that we have gotten plenty of referrals. I would say that's usually how we get new business, is through referrals. So clients that we've worked with in the past mention us to other companies or other NGOs or development banks, people within development banks that may need our services. That's one way. Two, we all went probably to some sort of graduate program or undergrad program, and our friends are all now working in this field of international development. So our personal relationships and our personal connections are very important. So for anyone, obviously, that's looking to enter this field, when you're in grad school, when you're an undergrad, those are the people that are going to give you projects when you guys get out. And that's really how we first started. And then came the referrals. And now we've been fairly successful also applying through RFP processes. So requests for proposals, organizations put them out there on these various Yahoo groups or on their websites. And we'll pick and choose the ones that we best see fit for us to apply and start doing the work. I would say the RFPs are more, in the impact evaluation world. Not so much in the corporate social responsibility world, but in the impact evaluation world, we've been fairly successful in winning some RFPs and kind of, it's like more like the cold calling of the international development world, you know?
Absolutely. You said that you started your organization straight out of your grad school, which is something that a lot of people envision themselves doing. Why did you make that choice? Why didn't you make the sort of more traditional career choice of getting a job or going back to a job?
Like unpacking that question a bit, I think one is why I'm in this field in the first place. And then two, why did I start the company? Because I always knew I wanted to be doing some sort of poverty alleviation work. I grew up in Brazil, in Manaus, in the heart of the Amazon rainforest. And I came to the United States for school, for undergrad about 10, 11 years ago. And growing up in Brazil really was, and in the family that I grew up in, really guided me to where I am today. My mother was always she's a renowned doctor in Brazil today, but since ever, she was always an activist and always, looking after minority groups and LGBTQ rights and HIV patient rights. So from a very early age, I was very little. I was out, during World AIDS Day, giving out condoms and talking to sex workers. I don't know. I was like 6. And I always asked the questions, like seeing the stories that my mom would bring home of people getting beaten up and discrimination. And I would always ask why, I'm like, they're so kind. They're just like you and I. Why is this happening to these people? And my mom always said, because it's our duty to help, bring these injustices to end. And the world is just a complex place and we have to do our part. So seeing my mom be so passionate about her work and seeing how much, I saw it as like, she's really helping people. I know that probably is insignificant what one person is doing in such a big issue, but it made her feel so good. And I saw how good came from it. And she always motivated me to do something for the world. My dad was always asking me, how much are you going to earn? How much are you going to earn? My mom was like, what are you doing that's good? What's happening? Like, how many articles are you going to publish? So I had the two sides, which I guess led me to the entrepreneurial and social impact world. And then also growing up in Brazil, I think a lot of us know that Brazil is an incredibly unequal society. Poverty just coexists right next door to richness. And, growing up we had a small condo, but of course we lived very well. We were healthy and happy. But just outside our doorsteps, there were these favelas, this shack. And when it rained, the houses would get flooded. People would go around in their little canoes. And I was very little. And I would always ask my mom, I don't understand. Why are their houses getting flooded? Why are they living like this? And I was very little. And I remember I used to cry, watching. I was like, I don't know. And so we would go and we would try to help. But it was always the question, why? Why is this happening? So as I grew up, I understood why. And I think also embedded in I'm Jewish and, in our Jewish faith, it's such an important thing, leave the world a better place than when you came into it. And so I think that's just what I try to do. It's both personal, it's family, it's also those Jewish traditions that have been in my family for such a long time. What can you do for someone else that needs it more than you do? I mean, I think I should have more of an impact. I'm always very dissatisfied with the impact that I have. You're always questioning yourself, what else can you do? And this is not enough. And it's never enough, but it's what guided me to do what I do. And then when I graduated, it's a long, whiny answer to it, but when I graduated, I wanted to stay in California because it's so beautiful here. And I met my husband here in California, and there were not a whole lot of opportunities that I could see to work in international development, especially with Latin America beyond, Mexico. There are a lot of big relationship between California and Mexico, but of course my heart was further south in Brazil and the rest of Latin America. So I didn't see a lot of possibilities of working in international development in California. It felt like I needed to go either to New York, Washington, or even maybe Miami. And I wasn't ready to go yet. So I said, okay, then I guess I'll try to do it myself. So I started, taking on some consulting gigs and getting involved in the region. And it sort of just grew organically out of that desire to be in poverty alleviation and be in California. So that's how Manaus got started.
Perfect. You mentioned that you'd like to believe or like to feel that you're having more impact. That's one of the difficulties of being a consultant it's your job to come and advise your clients. How do you work around not the frustration, but the issue of helping them through, as you said, human rights issues, or going and doing an impact evaluation, and then you give your report at the end of the day? Mm-hmm. How do you help to make sure that actually takes action?
Yeah, I think that's the question that keeps a lot of the people working consulting up at night, like thinking about it. What have I done? Is that report getting read? I think it's very challenging. I think especially in the corporate social responsibility world, we tend to have longer engagements with our clients. So we get to see their policies come to practice, and we get to see the work that they do, or some big investment that the company ends up doing in a certain cause. So that's always so nice and so rewarding. I think the impact assessment world has a bigger challenge, and I'm sure you know this too, Stephen. It's just, you turn in your report and you don't know what's going to happen to it. You pray that it's not going to stick in someone's desk or hard drive and never be read again. I mean, I think we've been lucky many times to continue working with our clients. So we've seen how they use our evaluation. Like oftentimes, if the results are good ones, mainly, they tend to disseminate that work. They tend to use that work to gather additional funds for their organization and promote their cause. They tend to disseminate that work to other organizations that are doing similar interventions, so that perhaps they can learn from what they've implemented. And even when what we find is not that great, that the impact is perhaps not there, we also see, workshops around it. How can we change? How can bring together practitioners working in that field to learn from the mistakes of the organization? And we try to help also on that dissemination work, like putting together either case studies or organizing the workshops, facilitating the workshops, speaking at the workshops, posting the studies online, always promoting the idea of making it public regardless of the result. But, I don't fool myself. I mean, I'm no stranger to the reality that many of our findings just really sit in someone's folder in their computer, and they're maybe read by a couple of people, and that's the end of our lengthy work. So it's hard, but I see it as a challenge, and I don't see it as a challenge just for consulting companies. I really see it as a challenge for the international development field in this world of impact evaluations, because oftentimes we're working with organizations and we ask the question, how did you come to implement this project? How was this idea born? And I don't want to discourage innovation, but you don't hear oftentimes them saying, oh, we read these published studies, these randomized control trials, and we know that for this type of development issue, there's this one intervention that really works, So it's almost like the impact assessment field and the implementation field, they're not always connected. And I think it's a challenge that's widespread in the development field. How can we make these study findings more accessible and more applicable in real life, so that we don't have to repeat them all the time? Because if you're doing something that's already proven to work, then I'm out of a job, and I'm happy about that. It's fine. But, make sure that those interventions are a good one, and that they're efficient, and that they're impactful. So I think it's a broader development challenge that we all face, as opposed to just a consulting challenge. So we continue to try to work on it through different ways, but it's a challenge, and we don't have the perfect answer for it by no means.
In that line, you've worked with a number of clients, both in the corporate sector and the public sector. Has there ever been a surprising result, either in the research that you do or a project that you've implemented, that, a story you could tell where you were just, either shocked or just sort of pleasantly surprised by something that you didn't expect?
I think when we work in the field, we always get very surprised, and hopefully not so shocked, but definitely always surprised. I think recently we are doing a study on the prevalence of violence against women in 5 countries in Asia. And you usually expect that what's going to be surprising or shocking is the results of your survey. So when you run this large survey across the country, you think that, okay, when I analyze my results, it's going to be really surprising, like these questions that I'm asking. In this one case, we were in this country, and the study will become public. So hopefully, if you guys check my website, the study will be published. But right now, I'm going to keep it somewhat anonymous. But we were running the survey in one country, and we were supposed to interview more than 500 women. And we started noticing, like at the end, we got just like 150 women to participate. It's a fairly small country. And when we started figuring out, like, why is the refusal rate so high? Like, what's happening? When we started digging into it, we found out that the news of the study had gone out and all these women were refusing to participate. So really it meant that the people that we were interviewing, the households that we were granted access to, were very different to the ones that we weren't. And the finding was in the refusal rate. Obviously, the women that didn't respond to the survey were more likely to be experiencing violence in their household. And we also found that in the other 4 countries that we ran the prevalence study, oftentimes women would agree to the survey and they would answer the survey, but when it came, and they would even answer some sensitive questions about sexual abuse or other things, but when it came to violence by their partner that was in the household with them, they wouldn't answer those questions. So it was surprising for us to see that the most shocking result was in the lack of answer to questions as opposed to information that we were actually obtaining. So it was an interesting experience.
Sometimes no answer is the answer, right?
Sometimes no answer is the answer. In this case, it's an unfortunate one, but it was surprising to us, I would say.
You mentioned you made the choice to stay in California for personal reasons, for a number of reasons. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you're alone? Do you feel like you're sort of in an island, sort of trying to figure your way around the international development world, knowing that obviously the major hubs are D.C. and London and Nairobi, these kinds of places? Or do you feel like you have a community out there of practitioners that you can also lean on?
Often feels like a island, like a entertainment island. I think,
It is Hollywood after all.
It's Hollywood. Yeah, I think I went to undergrad at USC, at University of Southern California. So I would say most of the people that I know from undergrad, and I think you end up being friends with the people in your dorm and not in your major, right? So yeah, my best friends are not working in the international development field. They're in very, very different fields than I am, oftentimes in entertainment. And then my graduate school friends that have left, they're really not in California. Like you said, they are in London, they're in Washington, they're in New York. So it feels like an island. You have to be more proactive in California and find your peers and stay in touch with them. So I'm always willing to talk to people. My graduate school has really been great. We all do a very good job at keeping in touch, and we're very open to talking to other alumni and to talking to recent grads. So you just got to be more proactive, and you got to say yes a lot to people that want to talk to you, and you end up finding the pockets of international development in LA. But it is a lot harder. I mean, when I go for client visits in Washington, D.C., I'm always like, this is an amazing town. You guys are all sitting at a bar and you're talking about politics and international development. When I go out here with my friends, I don't know. Sometimes they're talking about the Kardashians. Sometimes they're talking about, the movie that they're going to shoot next week. I'm very thankful also to be exposed because I get the same complaint about people in D.C.
I was just going to say, isn't it the other way around in D.C.? Sometimes it's like, oh gosh, can I get out of the political mill
exactly.
for a little while?
They're like,
I know so many people who, they have their guilty pleasures, right? Which you
they go
experience
home and
on
watch
regular
reality TV.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, here I feel oftentimes I don't watch a lot of TV and I find myself very quiet because I can't contribute to the conversations about the show. So sometimes I got to pick up a show here and there, just to be able to talk to people. But yeah, they complain in DC about the opposite, right? Like, I'm out of work, stop talking about politics. So I'm thankful for living in a city where people are doing very different things that I'm doing. And sometimes we find ways to work together. I have a lot of friends that are working in the movie industry and they decide to do movies that have a social impact, that are talking about social causes and international development challenges like human trafficking. And suddenly it becomes a very interesting conversation. And wow, they could be so impactful. If they get these movies in front of millions of people, that's huge. So at the end, we might be working for the same cause, just in different ways.
You have to divide your time in a certain way. You're as the president of an organization, but also someone who is interested in implementing a work. How do you go about doing that? How do you stay organized, and how do you make sure that you're spending enough time on winning new business, but also spending enough time on doing the work that you love, implementing it?
Oftentimes, I think as an owner, it ends up being a bit of a trade-off. If you want to be involved in implementation, perhaps you're letting go a little bit of your business development activities and building your pipeline. So you really got to find that the happy medium, but the happy medium might mean that you're running a smaller company, if you're not just totally invested just in managing your company and finding new business. So I think it's a personal decision. I've made that personal decision, but I don't want one day to be I don't have the aspiration of being a 50-person consulting company. I want to stay small and I want to stay involved. So that's sort of the big picture answer. And then on the day-to-day, iCal is my biggest friend. Like I stick to what I put on my calendar, so if I'm going to split the first 2 days of the week towards my calls that are more business development oriented or keeping up with clients or, hearing back from them or just managing the projects that are going on, but that I'm not leading, I'll stick to that plan. And then I'll leave my execution to the other 3 days. So I think it's just coming up with that idea, like how big do I want to be? How aggressive do I want to be with business development? And then mapping it out on your iCal, for the next month. So I try to stick a lot to my calendar, and without it, I have no brain. I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do today. It's all gone. I have no idea. But it changes, from month to month. I think you realize sometimes, wow, I've been spending so much time in implementation. It looks like my pipeline might be drying up in a month or two. And I think in the international development world, it takes a while for us to talk to people and from starting that inception conversation to booking the business can take a really long time, sometimes, 2 to 4 months. So you have to keep your eye on the ball, because at the end of the day, also you want to be doing business development, because otherwise you're out of a job and you're out of doing what you love. So I kind of balance it out month by month, taking a look at how busy we are. Can we take something on? Are we ready to hire more people? What path do we want to go on for the next 6 months? And then that sort of dictates the level of priority that I'm going to give either to business development or executing work.
You've talked about how much of your work comes through referral work, and that's that's the holy grail for any consultant, right? That you want to get to a point where people are calling you. When have you failed? When's the time when you sort of fell on your face? Either a project didn't work out the way that you intended it, or just something in the field happened that really didn't go the way you wanted it to. And how did you recover from that moment or that event to continue to be successful?
We have failure stories. I don't know if it's exactly what you're looking for with the question, but I think we've failed. There's been some learnings, as a small boutique consulting company. I think we oftentimes work with partners, and oftentimes we are the subcontractors for larger consulting companies. And that can be complicated. You're wearing someone else's t-shirt, you're wearing their hat. So you have to be mindful of you're acting on their behalf. And I think that's a different relationship when you're in the field. And then oftentimes you really don't have as much of the control of that client relationship as you'd like to have. You see things happening that you're like, oh, I would have done it differently. Not to say that what you have done would have been successful, but you don't have as much control of it. And sort of you just stay a lot more on like, tell me what to do and I'll go and do it. Not from a theoretical or rigor standpoint of the evaluations that we do. Of course, we contribute to that, but I think in the client relationship and the big picture steps of the project. So we've seen a few projects fail because of that when we are under that subcontractor position, and we're kind of lodged in between, and we feel like we can't offer much to improve the client relationship. Because I think that's been really interesting for me in international development, to get to what you want to do. It's not enough to just do good work and go by the terms of reference and do what you were supposed to do. You really got to have, at the end, we're all people working in these companies. We got to like each other. We have to have a good personal connection to work well together. No one wants to be working with someone that they dislike. And that's just the reality of it. So I think that's been a big learning, and that's been when we have failed, oftentimes has been not because of the challenge of the project, because I think we all learn from those challenges. Of course, we work in a very challenging field, and we have failed in achieving the international development outcome that we were looking for, but we learn from it and we'll do it better next time. But when projects have been sort of stopped in their tracks and we just got through half of the activities and we didn't finish it, it really has been more about personal connections and how can we all get along as people and work together as people. And that's just the learning, you got to build a good working environment and build good connection with people and have good understanding of your roles and responsibilities and what you're each going to do and how you're going to contribute and help each other out, work as a team in this very difficult field. So that's what we've tried to improve. And, there's a couple of clients that we haven't done business with again. And I hope to get them back one day. But, it's like, okay, it's not working out. Like, these people are not working well together. And we might have been part of that problem. But it's been mostly about these like personal relationships as opposed to, I don't know, like development challenges that we've encountered.
It's amazing in a big organization too. Your contract holder or the person you're reporting to may be oil and water, but just down the hall there might be your best friend. And so that's always an interesting juxtaposition as well.
Yeah. So you just gotta, it's like knowing that at the end of the day, we're all people working together and we want to be happy doing what we're doing. So make sure you're working together, because otherwise it's not going to be pretty when you hit the field, so that's been a big lesson for us.
2 more questions for you. First, one, you said you want to keep your consulting company manageable, small right now. You're happy with sort of how you're going. What's the next 5 years look like for you? Are you going to be doing the same thing? Are you going to be building a new muscle in the organization, maybe a new, carving out a new niche, or what's it look like for you? Can you look that far ahead?
I think the next 5 years, we're still going to be doing the same thing, but we're going to be doing the same things differently with more scale. I hope that's the plan. I don't want to exit and the corporate social responsibility field or the impact evaluation field. There's plenty to do in the fields that we work on right now. So I think the idea is to reach more scale and reach more significance, be working in longer term projects, where we see that we're more involved, that we have more impact, and they're larger scale projects. So I think as we mature and as we build our portfolio of projects, that's the hope, to be working in a more impactful way and in a larger scale, but still stick to the fields that we love so much,
sure,
which is CSR and impact evaluation.
Finally, I asked this question of everybody here in the Terms of Reference podcast. You have created success in your career. You chose to start your own organization, and you chose a couple of places that you were passionate about. A lot of people listening to this podcast are either thinking about transitioning careers, or they're coming out of grad school, or they might even just be a bachelor's degree, looking to start their first career. What critical piece of advice do you have for how to create success in the development or aid world?
And my experience with it has been that I think, looking from the outside, because even when you're in undergrad or graduate school, you're looking from the outside still, outside in. And it looks very daunting. Like, you're like, wow, there's not a lot of opportunity. It looks almost like a small field. But once you get in it, you start seeing all these offshoots of it. I can be, actually implementing these projects. I can be, doing more charitable work, like grant work, or I can be doing impact evaluation. I could be working within a private sector company within corporate social responsibility and working on development projects. It starts to look a lot bigger. So my advice is talk to people. I think people in the international development field are very nice. So oftentimes you ask for an informational interview, or you just cold email someone and say, wow, I admire your work so much. Could we chat about it? So talk to as many people as you can and reach out to your alumni network. Talk to people that graduated from the same school as you and are in the field, and just ask lots of questions, because every time you talk to someone, it gives you a different idea of where to go within international development. And then you start realizing that, okay, the field is quite big. There are a lot of opportunities for me. Once you've kind of narrowed down in what space you want to be within international development field, to just stay, be persistent, look for those jobs, keep in it, and then just enter the international development field one way or another, and then find your best place within it after a few years. But I would say just talk to as many people as you can. And I'll just do a shout out for my graduate school program, because I think they've been really great. I went to University of California, San Diego, to IRPS by its acronym as it's best known. And everyone there is always so willing to talk to you. And the peers that we studied with have really been a great network for the work that we do. And they're all doing amazing things in their respective organizations. So, go to grad school and then talk to everyone.
Tamar,
if you can, go to grad school.
Tamar, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a delightful conversation.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It was a pleasure to talk to you. It was really great.
You've been listening to the Terms of Reference podcast from aidpreneur.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes.